Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. Today we're going to visit Indianapolis. It is a blend of modernity and original origins, ancient traditions and advanced technology. Indianapolis boasts art museums that showcase examples of cultural achievements from past centuries and modern times. Indianapolis hosts many festivals and events each year, with the Indy 500 automobile race being the most popular. But in our story, the tranquil Indianapolis that was to become for the Blackburn family a center of peace and God's home on earth became the site of a violent tragedy. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had returned from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car, but a phone call kept him in the vehicle for a few minutes. After finishing the call, he leisurely got out of the car and went into the house. When he opened the door, he froze and the gym bag fell out of his hands. His wife was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Davy was confused and badly shocked. He rushed to his beloved, gave her a cursory examination, felt for a pulse and urgently dialed the emergency phone number. The young woman was alive. In the living room where the tragedy occurred was a complete mess. Things were scattered. The purse of the unfortunate was emptied. On the second floor of the house, a small child was crying. Emergency services arrived at the house after 8 minutes. The area was cordoned off. The house was filled with police officers and investigators. The victim was rushed to the hospital. She turned out to be 28-year-old Amanda Blackburn. But let's start in order not to miss any important details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Byers was born on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan. She attended school in Indianapolis, Indiana, but the family moved to Elkhart in 1995. There, Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, and as early as 2008, she graduated from Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida, with an associate's degree. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and the power of God's Word were paramount. Amanda's father was the lead pastor of First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. The religious traditions of the church, sermons, and Psalter the girl knew from childhood by heart and honored them unconditionally. When other children were in a hurry to grow up to know the taste of adult life, to go to parties and fall in love, Amanda loved Jesus and dreamed of serving him. But God already loved his Amanda. After all, he had created her in the likeness of a blonde-haired, slender girl with an open, kind smile and sincere intentions. But not only the girl's appearance was perfect, her thoughts and heart were also virgin. In every act of Amanda was love for her neighbor. As a teenager, Amanda took a vow of chastity and agreed not to even kiss a man until she was married, and she was always true to her word. But the girl's heart beat harder when she met her true and only love. Turned out to be Davy Blackburn. He was a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The guy studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and was also from a Christian and believing family. Davy and Amanda met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson Christian Band concert organized by her sister and Davy's best friend. At that time, they were studying in different colleges, but every vacation the lovers spent together. It was pure platonic love, devoid of earthly lusts. They took walks together, shared their innermost thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. They were never bored, for they knew how to rejoice in small things and sincerely joked with each other. Once, before returning to school, Davy and Amanda had a mock milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davy then jokingly called Amanda a milk girl. Looking at her, he realized he had met the girl he wanted to marry. The couple dated long distance for a long time. They were constantly messaging each other on messengers, called each other and chatted for hours, every vacation they spent together. They were so reverent and tender about a serious relationship between a man and a woman that they visited a psychologist for a long time to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1, 2008, the marriage ceremony of Amanda and Davy Blackburn took place. After the wedding, Davy told friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he knew that because of God's plan, there would be a special bond between them. For the first 4 years after the wedding, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina. Davy was an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble, but the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Amanda that she move to Indianapolis to organize a new church for youth. Davy worked as a youth pastor, production director, and assistant campus pastor. Amanda was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones, and for a while struggled with the need to leave South Carolina, but she finally relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved from South Carolina to Indianapolis to plant an independent high-profile church in the North Side. The religious organization started by the young family was geared toward young people. As is made clear in the weekly videos the couple posted on their website about relationship advice, conflict resolution, and what the Bible says about intimate relationships. In 2014, the family had their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. The family was perfectly happy. They had a comfortable home on a quiet street, a favorite job in the church, which was regularly attended by a large number of young people. Their sermons were listened to and believed in. They lived in perfect harmony and understanding. But the day of November 10, 2015, changed the family's life once and for all. Ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence in the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8:30 a.m. The ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence. The pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital, where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent a series of resuscitative measures. But sadly, Amanda died the next day, along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family was expecting a baby girl, who was named Evie Grace, at her burial. Her death sparked a lot of sympathy and prayers on social media for an extended period of time, as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared dead, Davy released a statement saying that Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone she knew. She made it her life's mission to know Jesus as her personal savior to multitudes. Through her death and legacy, more people will come to a saving faith in Christ. I know without a shadow of a doubt that she wants me to continue what we started here in Indy. I firmly believe that God is still good, that He is taking our tragedy and turning it into triumph, and that the best is indeed yet to come. Dave wrote, "The murder of the pregnant woman was a blow not only to the entire Orthodox family, but also a shock to the entire state. People demanded that the perpetrator of Amanda and her unborn child be found and punished." In his first interview under oath, Davy Blackburn said he found his wife Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially naked, with her underwear lying nearby, herself lying on the floor in a pool of blood face down. The pastor told investigators that he left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center to work out. When he left the door unlocked. "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door?" he told investigators. It's hard to say whether the criminals would have stopped if Davy had still used the key, but it's pretty obvious that they wouldn't have entered the house so easily, and Amanda had precious time to contact emergency services. But that didn't happen, and the attack left Amanda with 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was to the head. No arrests were made in the case. Just days after the crime, police quickly determined that her husband, Davy Blackburn, was not involved in the horrific incident. However, in the trial transcripts, Davy Blackburn's testimony is supplemented by the testimony of the first emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department, Scott Floyd, who arrived at the home after Davy's call. He said Davy Blackburn was outside at the end of the driveway with bloody hands when they arrived at the house. Scott stated that Davy was very calm at the time. According to Scott, Davy did not understand what had happened to his wife, Amanda. He maintained that she was lying on the floor, and he could not wake her up. Davy claimed that he came home from the gym at about 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway, occasionally getting out, strolling down the driveway and peeking through the front door window to see if baby Weston was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8:10 a.m. and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8:22 a.m. Took him 12 minutes to make the call. In an emergency situation, 12 minutes is a long time. He repeatedly said he just thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy, that maybe his wife had gotten dizzy and fell. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot to her head had occurred about a couple hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. Davy was asked if he had called anyone else. He said that after he called 911, he called his father. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davy Blackburn. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym, and he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted November 12th showed the woman suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to the lower left arm that went to her biceps, and a through-and-through gunshot wound that went in and out of her upper back. There were also multiple scratches on the left cheek, a split lip, and a knocked-out lower tooth. The above injuries indicated a possible struggle between Amanda and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined, and neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed. For example, a neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davy left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsall, said their street was not the type of neighborhood where a shooting could occur, and that the Blackburns didn't deserve this. The neighbors were shocked, as everyone thought the Blackburn family were wonderful and truly loving people. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards and MacBook bag, the initial theory was robbery. During the investigation, police determined that on the morning of November 10, 2015, several emergency calls were made reporting a home invasion at separate homes near Blackburn's home. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell phone, laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking lot. The sliding glass door to her apartment was open, she said. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at a home on Sunnyfield Court. Someone broke through the patio screen and got inside. According to police, for televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing from the home. 5 minutes after that, someone else from Sunnyfield Court called the emergency services. It was Davy Blackburn. Lieutenant Richard Riedel of the Indianapolis Police Department said police are looking for a connection between the homicide and other burglaries that occurred in the same neighborhood in the morning. Police have not released details about the investigation, honoring the secrecy of the investigation, but after getting hold of images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released them asking the public to identify and help the investigation. Davy Blackburn was confident that the police department was doing everything they could to catch his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured that they had never seen such carte blanche given to them to continue the investigation, so they were confident that very soon some of these promising leads would help find the person or persons responsible. The key clues used to track down the 3 suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring, which was used during the robberies. Authorities recovered the vehicle November 11th near the Blackburns' home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched the stolen card of Amanda Blackburn. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine the ATM camera and found video showing the driver covering his face with the stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses to identify the suspects. DNA testing from the sweater confirmed that Jalen Watson was one of the suspects. Watson's identification was the first major breakthrough in the case. The affidavit said cell phone records were obtained because Watson's number was in the database because of his parole for another burglary. Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also obtained. These records showed that Watson's and Gordon's cell phones were in the area when the crime was committed. The phone records also indicated that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Larry Taylor was the final piece of the puzzle. By examining surveillance footage in the area, police were able to identify Taylor's phone number and trace his address. In the days that followed, Reports also surfaced that a gun had been found near the Blackburn home. Police said a man delivered the gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming to have found it outside the couple's home. The gun was analyzed by crime lab technicians. After 2 weeks of investigation and detective work, police charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jalen Watson with the murder of Amanda Blackburn. A third burglary suspect, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, was arrested for a parole violation, but was not charged with a felony because he did not enter the Blackburn home. After receiving crime lab results, a gun found near the victim's home was proven to be the weapon of the crime. All 3 assailants were apprehended. When questioned, Larry Taylor said that he shot the woman twice somewhere because she jumped on him and he didn't want her to scratch him. Then, when she fell, he leaned over her body and shot her in the back of the head and bent over her, watching her bleed to death. A criminal trio came to rob the Blackburn house. They just wanted some money, so they headed to the Blackburn home, where the husband had left the front door unlocked when he left for the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda to keep her out of the way. Taylor hit her with a gun. Watson and Gordon saw the woman and wanted to leave. They already had the bank cards they had stolen earlier, so they went looking for an ATM. They tried unsuccessfully to get $500 from one ATM, but got $1.400 from another. This is where they got caught on CCTV. They then drove back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. In their absence, a struggle ensued in the house. Amanda came to her senses after being hit and lunged at the perpetrator, at which point he tackled the woman. Afterward, Taylor put the stolen debit cards in the car of accomplices who had gone to an ATM at the time of the crime, and when they returned, he admitted to shooting Amanda. According to court documents, the Blackburn home was the 3rd target of the November 10th attack by Taylor, Watson, and Gordon. In the first break-in, the thieves stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the resident was asleep. While inside the home, they discovered they were being recorded by a video camera, but simply moved on. The group drove up to another home, broke in through a patio window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater that eventually helped police identify them, the affidavit said. Court documents outlined the evidence police collected against the suspects. The most important piece of evidence, Watson's DNA, was found on a pink sweater taken during the second burglary, which was then used to cover his face from a surveillance camera as he tried to withdraw cash using Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with the investigation in return for a reduced sentence. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary. He said he may have stopped in the Blackburn neighborhood, but claimed he was so confused he couldn't remember. Formal charges were filed by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including the very same felony, after knowingly and willfully killing Amanda Blackburn. Jalen Watson is charged with a felony. Both he and Taylor face multiple charges of burglary, robbery, and theft. Diana Gordon, who was in custody due to a parole violation, also faces burglary charges. There was a 4th person who knew about the robberies, burglaries, and other crimes, but did not participate in them. He was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Height praised the cooperation that led to the arrest. The detectives worked tirelessly, all day long without sleep, to solve the murders with the assistance of Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry. Justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors said they would consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, they said there was no evidence to support the rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial took place in December 2021, but the trial was over in seconds when it was discovered that one of the jurors had shared information about the case with other jurors. The disclosure interrupted the trial. A mistrial was declared. The final trial was held in October 2022. Subsequent jury selection was more thorough. The county drew more than 100 people as possible jurors. Each had to fill out a 16-page questionnaire so attorneys could assess whether they could reach a fair verdict. Larry Joe Taylor was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for the murder of Amanda Blackburn and for additional charges related to a burglary from a home. Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea agreements and testified against Larry Taylor at trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Jalen Watson and Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. A murder conviction in Indiana can send a person to prison for 45 to 60 years, and some are punishable by life in prison or the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence, which means he could face an additional 20 years in prison because Amanda Blackburn was pregnant when he allegedly massacred her. Davy Blackburn, the church's pastor, said he is relieved that those responsible for killing his wife have been caught and will not be able to harm anyone else. Amanda Blackburn's death has resonated with thousands of people, including the state's chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 people. Among them was Governor Mike Pence. Resident Church has set up a donation page to help pay for Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn said he is hopeful for a judicial system that will certainly show wisdom to the people who have caused his family so much pain. Incredibly, he has repeatedly reported that he has decided to forgive Amanda's killers. I was very relieved to learn of the arrest, he told reporters. Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace and hope. Amanda Blackburn's case has generated significant interest across the country, with coverage appearing in national and international media. Davy Blackburn changed his role from that of an unhappy husband to that of a popular blogger. He began to capitalize on his tragedy and record multiple podcasts and videos, which he called Nothing Wasted. He began appearing on TV stations and speaking out about his wife's death, repeating over and over the pain he had experienced and recounting the tragedy. But he didn't seem unhappy. Amanda's death made Davy not only famous, but rich. The fact that he received an insurance payout after his wife's death does suggest that he didn't accidentally forget to lock the door that day on November 10, 2015. Didn't he? What do you guys think? On March 2, 2016, Davy Blackburn bought a new 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom home with a pool. He then sold the very house where Amanda was murdered. For an unhappy husband who lost his beloved, Davy was pretty happy. In July 2016, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog and captioned it, "How happy I am to have pool parties in my new home." Now Davy Blackburn is happy in his new marriage. Nothing is wasted serendipity. Turn your eyes to Jesus, gaze upon his marvelous countenance, and earthly things become strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Story 2. The fear of snakes is perhaps the most common phobia on Earth, and it seems understandable. Some of them are lethal, so fearing snakes is just a genetically ingrained instinct of survival in our brains. However, it would be unfair to label snakes solely as predators. They are also amazing creatures with incredible abilities and appearances, capable of evoking a wide range of emotions, but certainly leaving no one indifferent. In our story today, we'll talk about a rare snake that suddenly attacked its owner, ending his life. Ben Rennick was just 29 years old when he was found deceased in his renowned snake breeding facility. Benjamin Blue Birch Rennick was born in August 1987 in Missouri. He grew up in the countryside alongside his family. Ben had an older brother, Sam, with whom he shared a very close bond. In 1989, the Rennick family moved to a picturesque farmhouse. The boys spent a lot of their time outdoors, and it was then that Ben began to take an interest in snakes. A tragic incident in September 1992 triggered a series of unfortunate events. The family was away when a gas leak occurred, leading to an explosion in their beautiful home. The Rennicks were forced to move into a trailer. After some time, Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Despite these hardships, the family overcame. They were very close-knit and always supported each other in any situation. Recovering from previous tragedies in 2002, they moved to a new home, where a special room was designed for Ben to keep his snakes. In 2009, after a long battle with cancer, Kim passed away. Before her death, she made her sons promise to look after the farm and pass it on to their children. As time went by, Ben's love for snakes knew no bounds, and the young man founded Rennick Reptiles, which soon gained recognition. This allowed him to sell snakes worldwide from the United Kingdom to Japan. Breeding snakes became the meaning of his life. He was described as a great breeder who was devoted to his work, caring more about the snakes than the money. The reptile farm bred a multitude of reptilian subspecies, growing and reproducing both the most common species and some of the rarest subspecies on Earth. Ben's reptiles were of immense value. Just a portion of his python collection was valued at over $1 million. However, Ben was lonely and had long dreamed of starting a family. So, in 2010 at a party, he met a woman named Lindley. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and within weeks, Ben introduced his girlfriend to his brother Sam and Sam's fiancé Eli. Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, so they quickly found common ground and became friends. Lindley swiftly became part of the Rennick family, and they started living together. She assisted Ben on the snake breeding farm. They were in love and lived as a full family even before they made their union official. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to a daughter, Amelia. Ben was overjoyed to become a father. However, the happy family life once again encountered problems. Frank Rennick, Ben's father, encountered significant troubles in his business. Previously, he had engaged in several fraudulent stock transactions to cover medical bills and Kim's treatment. Just a day before the FBI planned to visit the farm, Frank took his own life. Frank's passing halted the investigation. The sons were deeply affected by yet another parental loss but managed to get through it, coming together and supporting one another once more. Ben inherited the house and farm, while Sam received a sum of money far exceeding the house's value. Each brother had his own family and children, but this never prevented them from living as one big family in their parents' home. They lived together, and Sam, without hesitation, spent his inheritance on repairing the farm. Initially, everything was fine, but soon financial disputes caused a rift between the brothers. After their father's death, Ben focused on his business and his family. He decided to formalize his relationship with Lindley. On April 14, 2014, they married, making Lindley a full-fledged member of the Rennick household. Lindley and Ben opened a second business, a spa called Essentia Spa Incorporated, but the business Lindley managed faced financial difficulties. Ben and Lindley often argued about finances. Lindley worked hard, but not enough to cover the salon's expenses. At the same time, Sam and his wife also faced financial challenges. Ben allowed them to sell some of the furniture in the house. Lindley disapproved, leading to a rift between the families. The relationship was irreparably damaged. Ben decided to improve the family's financial situation by arranging to sell some rare reptiles for a significant sum. However, the deal fell through due to a tragedy that occurred on the farm. On June 8, 2017, Lindley walked into one of the farm's barns. There, on the floor in a pool of blood, lay Ben. Lindley called his brother Sam for help and dialed the emergency number. She reported that she had found her husband unconscious on the ground. During the conversation, Lindley dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued the conversation and confirmed that his brother was dead. Sam suggested that a snake might be to blame for what had happened. Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were called to the snake breeding facility. For the first time in a long while, law enforcement officers were afraid to enter the farm, facing the prospect of encountering over 3,000 snakes and conducting an examination of a man lying in blood, wary of a possible attack from a deadly viper believed to be the assailant. However, when coroner Dave Colbert arrived and took a closer look, he discovered a shell casing on a shelf at eye level. This was something far more sinister than a venomous snake bite. Shell casings were found near the body, but no weapon was discovered. The assailant had shot Ben multiple times in the back and head. None of the relatives heard shots or saw the attacker. Sam and Lindley were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. Lindley suggested that Sam might be involved in her husband's death, even citing a motive. Apparently Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. Sam was asked to undergo a lie detector test, which he passed. The police had no reason to detain Linley and Sam, so they were released. The investigation into who might have wanted Ben Rennick dead began. Various theories were proposed, the first being robbery, but it remained unconfirmed as none of the rare snakes were missing and all valuable items remained untouched. Just days after the demise of Ben Rennick, police interrogated Linley. They tested her hands and clothing for gunpowder residue, but the results came back negative. Following her husband's funeral, Linley ceased communications with Sam and Eli. She sold her husband's business, inherited the house, and sought to claim a life insurance payout for Ben worth $1 million. After receiving the insurance money, Linley planned to sell the Rennick family home for $740,000. Sam's family was notified about the eviction. Upon discovering the rapid insurance claim and business sale following her husband's passing, Sam Rennick suspected his brother's wife in the tragic event, sharing his suspicions with investigators. Linley was called in for another interrogation. There, she admitted to having complex relations with Ben and occasionally meeting with a man named Eric. Eric had an alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. Linley's admissions were startling. It turned out, about 3 years after their marriage was officially registered, she was unfaithful to Ben, with at least 2 different men. Messages between the couple showed that Ben suspected his wife of infidelity, which had indeed strained their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, the Missouri State Highway Patrol conducted a polygraph test on Linley, informing her that she had failed. However, without solid evidence linking her to the crime, she was released. Nevertheless, the investigation into Ben Rennick's case slowed but did not cease. Later, investigators learned that a month before Ben Rennick's passing, Linley had made her first attempt on his life. She concocted a story of Ben being a cruel tyrant who oppressed her daily and even physically assaulted her. She shared this story with a spa salon coworker to garner support and assistance. They plotted to end Ben's life by giving him a poisonous protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unaware, Ben drank it. He fell severely ill during that period but survived, oblivious to the fact that he had been poisoned. Linley Rennick was interrogated by investigators 6 times in total. Further assistance in the investigation came unexpectedly. On January 14, 2020, information from a state prison surfaced, with a witness claiming to have knowledge about Ben Rennick's demise. The witness was Brandon Blackwell. He told Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators that Linley had shot Ben and had conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon mentioned that he had dated Linley while she was married to Ben. 1.5 years after Ben's death, they had a child together, but by 2019, they had separated. Brandon claimed that Linley confessed the act to him. She had conspired with her spa salon coworker, Ashley Shaw, and another ex-boyfriend, Michael Humphrey. Years after Ben's demise, Linley Rennick and her former boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, were arrested for Ben's death. However, following their arrest, Linley and Humphrey pointed fingers at each other. So who really pulled the trigger? According to Michael's testimony, on the day of the event, he went to the farm with Linley, who asked him to pose as a buyer. He put on gloves and was supposed to shoot Ben but couldn't do it. Eventually, Linley took the gun and shot her husband herself. The investigation into Ben Rennick's death continued for 3 long years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Linley Rennick, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw. Ashley was offered immunity in exchange for her cooperation, and she testified against her boss. The former spa salon employee shared that Linley had complained about her husband and convinced her to assist in a plan. She claimed that Ben was constantly belittling, demeaning, and even physically harming her. Fearing divorce would lead to Ben gaining custody of her children, Linley decided to eliminate him, planning together to poison him with a lethal cocktail. During questioning, Linley and Michael accused each other of Ben's demise. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey faced trial in Audrain County. His lawyers hoped that revealing the murder weapon would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Despite possessing the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it. To lessen his sentence, Michael Humphrey also made a deal with the prosecution. disclosing the location of the murder weapon. His cooperation led to a life sentence on a less severe charge of second-degree murder, without defense at the trial. On January 3, 2021, Michael Humphrey was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. The trial against Lindley Rennick began on December 6, 2021. She was charged with the shooting and demise of Ben Rennick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. Court documents stated that the plot to end Ben Rennick's life originated in Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement mentioned that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial troubles and that Lindley feared Ben could take her children away, leading her to fabricate a story of domestic abuse. The first attempt to end Ben Rennick involved a protein shake laced with narcotics. Search warrants for Ben and Lindley Rennick's Facebook accounts confirmed the protein shake story and Ben's awareness of Lindley's financial issues. The court hearing detailed the events of the day Ben Rennick was killed, fully reconstructing the sequence of events through cross-examination. On the day of the incident, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent text messages from Lindley's phone inside the spa to conceal their true location and mislead the investigation. According to court documents, Humphrey intended to end Ben's life, but asked Lindley to do it. After firing shots, Humphrey collected most of the casings, but missed some in his haste. He also disposed of Lindley Rennick's clothing after returning to the spa, where Lindley took a shower, which helped avoid detection of gunpowder residue on her hands and clothes on the day of the incident. Defense attorney Catherine Berger asked Lindley Rennick to share her personal and family history, education and massage therapy, relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey, work history, and the lead-up to her marriage with Ben Rennick, portraying the suspect as a victim of domestic violence. However, no evidence of such violence was found, undermining this defense narrative. Michael Humphrey was part of a group that allegedly planned to end Ben Rennick's life. Lindley Rennick described her relationship with Humphrey as codependent, involving his drug dealing and her addiction. Lindley Rennick ended her relationship with Humphrey at the end of 2010. According to previous witness statements, she reconnected with him about a month before Ben Rennick's death. Lindley Rennick denied the prosecution's allegations related to the supposed plans to end Ben Rennick's life, including the alleged failed attempt to poison Ben with a protein shake containing narcotics. The couple was experiencing both financial and marital difficulties. The spa center was failing, and contractual deals for selling snakes had yet to yield financial benefits. In court, Lindley admitted to having extramarital relationships with various men, for which she expressed deep regret. By the time Lindley considered discussing divorce, she was unsure who to turn to, given her father's divorce history and his firm views on divorce and affairs. Wanting someone to support her in her conversation with Ben, she reached out to past boyfriends, leading to a reconnection with Michael Humphrey. During cross-examination by the prosecution, Lindley admitted to willingly participating in her husband's death and intentionally concealing Michael Humphrey's involvement. Due to marital difficulties, including disputes, alleged physical and sexual abuse by Ben, and the stress associated with his snake breeding business, Lindley feared him and was concerned about his mood when she would bring up the topic of divorce on June 8, 2017. Hence, she brought Michael Humphrey to the farm that day. She claimed her presence at the farm was not to end her husband's life, but to request a divorce. Lindley said she took some trash from Ben to dispose of. Then she entered the nursery, where she saw Humphrey and Ben finishing washing their hands. Lindley recounted not being able to hear their conversation, focused more on how to tell Ben she wanted a divorce. Lindley's voice trembled as she described seeing Humphrey draw a pistol and shoot her husband. Ran up to me and pushed me towards the car, Lindley testified in court. Reality hit when she returned to the snake breeding facility and discovered Ben's body. Lindley called Ben's brother, Sam, who arrived. They checked for a pulse and whether Ben was breathing, thinking he might still be alive. Lindley expressed regret for not telling the police then and there that she had been at the breeding facility earlier with Michael Humphrey and not sharing her version of events. As she was suspected in her husband's death, the life insurance policy Ben Rennick had taken out years earlier could mean a payout of $1 million. Lindley waived her rights to this money. Ben Rennick became the beneficiary of a trust after his father's death. His assets went to Ben Rennick and his children, not Lindley. Nonetheless, Linley received money she had contributed to the trust and a scholarship for her daughter. Linley confessed she sought support, so she shared her version of events with her then-boyfriend Brandon Blackwell. However, that relationship ended as soon as Linley had Brandon's child. During the court hearing, Linley shared her regrets about her continuous deception. "I was just trying to escape from the truth of what happened," she said, adding that she never wished for her husband's death. Linley Rennick's defense team did not petition for a new trial following the final verdict. No appeals were filed against her conviction. Linley Rennick filed a defamation lawsuit against Blackwell, claiming his statements about her involvement in her husband's death were false. However, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Linley Rennick's testimony during cross-examination. He queried why she did not check on her husband after hearing gunshots, why she did not call 911, why she sent friendly messages to him and Humphrey after the shooting, and why she continued to lie even as emergency responders got involved. Rennick admitted to suggesting the police consider Ben's brother as a suspect. Often tearful and somber during her testimony, prosecutor Zellner portrayed her as a mastermind, albeit a clumsy one. He described her as cruel enough to accuse the deceased's brother, saying during his rebuttal, "Do you know how cold your heart is?" During the sentencing for second-degree murder and armed criminal action, Linley Rennick broke down. She did not admit her guilt. On December 9, 2021, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. The 33-year-old Linley Rennick was sentenced to 13 years for murder and an additional 3 years for armed criminal action. In January, Judge Kevin Crane handed down a total sentence of 16 years. The sentence outraged Sam and other relatives of Ben. They believed that Michael and Linley deserved life imprisonment, as they were both as guilty as any other co-conspirators. Sam Rennick's final words expressed complete disappointment. He was astonished that the life of a person in Missouri could be valued at just 13 years. Ben Rennick was a young man full of hope, with a potentially bright future. Due to the actions of one woman, he and Sam found themselves in a difficult situation, now unable to mend their relationship. Yet, the great snake breeder, Ben Rennick, continues to live on in a way he would surely have appreciated. He became famous for breeding a new snake species named after him. The reptile community was shaken by Ben Rennick's death and wanted to help. They collected and donated money to support Ben's family. Ben's valuable snakes were dispersed and sold to various reptile experts and enthusiasts, while the main snake in Ben's life was sentenced to 13 years. And we may never truly know who actually pulled the trigger, as this story is filled with the lies of the most vile and despicable reptile, Linley Rennick. Story 3. Did you know that 1 in 8 people on Earth suffer from a mental health disorder? According to statistics, there were almost 1 billion people with mental health disorders in 2019. Such diseases lead to unemployment, disability, and crime. Among them, 2 groups are distinguished. The first includes serious mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, hallucinations, psychosis, and borderline conditions. The second category is represented by neurotics and psychopaths, aggressive and demonstrative personalities. Sometimes people are unaware of their diagnosis for decades. Some of them live a normal life without causing harm to others. Therefore, the clinical diagnosis of psychopath is not made today. The disease is called otherwise character disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Of course, not all psychopaths are violent criminals, but many of them pose a threat to the well-being of another person. For example, his or her self-esteem, mental balance, or finances. Nevertheless, there are some people who are so rude and out of control that they have to serve serious sentences for the crime they committed or be hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. The story in question happened to Nicola Edgington, a British citizen. Amazingly, a young woman suffering from mental illness has repeatedly asked the relevant authorities, including the police, to pay attention to her condition so that she did not make trouble. And what came out of it you will learn further. On October 10, 2011, an egregious incident occurred in Bexley Heath, in the southeast of England. In the early hours of the morning, 2 women were attacked on a street in the town. The first victim was Carrie Clark, a 22-year-old artist. The girl was standing at a bus stop waiting for transportation without a hint of danger, was listening to music. At that time, she was approached by an unfamiliar woman in her 30s. Without further ado, she jumped on Carrie and stabbed her. Carrie fell to the ground in surprise. The attacker rushed at her, but the girl's reaction was faster. She grabbed the knife with her hand before the weapon reached her chest. The unconditional reflexes to survive were stronger than the situation. The victim even managed to push her abuser away. Carrie intercepted the knife, despite the pain from the blade, and began to scream. She called for help. At the same time, the girl asked her attacker what she was doing, and if her head was all right. To which the woman replied that the only person with a knife in her hand on this street was Carrie herself. In addition, she demanded that she hand over the knife, which the resourceful Carrie certainly did not do. The atmosphere, as well as the conversation that took place between them, puzzled the intruder, and she fled to the other side of the street. However, the matter did not end there. While passers-by rushed to the victim, the criminal disappeared from sight. Turns out that she went into a butcher shop where she stole a knife. Then she noticed another woman standing with her back to her. Without thinking twice, she rushed towards her. The attack on 58-year-old Sally Hodkin was fierce and ruthless, striking her in the neck. The attacker practically decapitated the poor, elderly woman. Before she knew it, she fell to the ground and died. The perpetrator fled the scene as quickly as she had appeared. Perhaps the accidents would have continued further if not for the arrival of the police. They managed to track down the inadequate woman through CCTV cameras. A short while later, she was arrested in one of the nearby stores. At the time of her arrest, she appeared unperturbed. The law enforcement officers got the impression that she was even happy to be caught. The detainee was taken to the station where she was identified. The attacker turned out to be 31-year-old Nicola Edgington, who suffers from a mental health disorder. The woman has been admitted to an institution to deal with her acute condition. Meanwhile, detectives have launched an investigation into the case. Nicola was born on September 9, 1980, to Marion and Harry Edgington. She was the eldest among the other children, brother Tom and sister Sarah. The married couple was famous in certain circles. The father of the family was a respected foreign correspondent for the Daily Mail, a British daily newspaper. His wife was just like him, educated and charming. Tom and Sarah were quiet and obedient children. They did not cause much trouble to their parents. That could not be said of Nicola. The girl was a difficult child from an early age. Despite her angelic appearance, she possessed a devilish character. At school, she insulted her classmates, often hitting them. She studied badly and was insolent to her teachers. In addition, at home, Nicola provoked quarrels between parents. Eventually, conflicts and tension led to divorce Edgingtons. Harry moved to France, but continued to keep in touch with his children. Marion was concerned about her daughter's behavior. She repeatedly showed her to a psychologist and conducted various kinds of examinations. However, they did not give the proper result. Everything was written off on the peculiarities of the girl's character. Many years later, her brother Tom said that her sister just knew how to pretend to be normal. After the dissolution of the marriage, relations with her mother became strained. In addition, the girl had grown up. By her early teens, she had become completely uncontrollable. The young lady allowed herself to be absent from home for days at a time. Due to this, Marion repeatedly contacted the police. Once, Nicola called the social service with a request to place her in a care center. The girl complained about her mother. It is not known exactly whether she really needed help or did it out of spite. However, her wish was heard. As protective measures until the circumstances are clarified, the girl was taken away from home and placed in a specialized institution. However, there the young lady showed herself in all her glory, after which she was returned home. The social workers stated that she was a danger to other children. When Nicola returned home, her behavior only worsened. She started drinking and smoking and got involved with bad company. For this reason, Marion and her children were forced to move to Forest Row in East Sussex. The woman dreamed of starting a new life where no one knew them. In the new place, Nicola began to study at a state comprehensive school. While Tom and Sarah went to live in a boarding school, Tom later recalled that he understood his mother's circumstances. Moreover, he enjoyed life away from his inadequate sister. He realized that Nicola's behavior was destructive to the psyche and well-being of the family. Consequently, on weekends Tom did not even want to return home. When Nicola was 15 years old, she dropped out of school. The girl did not accept her mother's request to finish her studies. She believed that she could do without education. In addition, she stopped perceiving the words of Marion. From this, their relationship became even more complicated, sometimes violent. One day, Nicola hit her mother with a cell phone. This gave the woman a black eye. The incident was reported to the police. However, Nicola only received a warning that it was unacceptable. In the end, it was decided to separate. Nicola was probably the initiator, as she had long wanted to get away from her mother's hyperparenting. Nicola settled on the south coast of England, in Brighton. Rent an apartment helped her father, about whom, by the way, she spoke negatively, claiming that more than once she was abused by him. However, Mr. Edgington denied these allegations. For a short time, Nicola managed to work as a hairdresser, a sales clerk, but nowhere for a long time. Some sources claim she also made a living as a stripper. Leading a free lifestyle at the age of 17, Nicola suspected she was pregnant. A medical examination confirmed it. The doctor informed Nicola of the impending birth of twins. However, the babies were not destined to be born, as Nicola's boyfriend punched her in the stomach. At the age of 19, she got pregnant again. This time, the father of the baby was another boyfriend who was involved in the trafficking of illegal drugs. By then, Ms. Edgington was also using drugs, which triggered the birth of the baby 3 months premature. Nevertheless, the boy was brought out, and Marion helped to care for him. Once out of work, Nicola continued to lead a binge lifestyle and use illegal substances. Because of this, she came under the supervision of the relevant doctors. It would seem that Nicola's life should have continued in a similar vein, but suddenly, there was a bright streak. She met a guy from Jamaica in a nightclub. He turned out to be a nice man. Subsequently, the young people got married. Another child was born in the marriage. The identity of the Jamaican is not disclosed, but it is known for sure that the period of their relationship was favorable. The man was an excellent father. He loved not only his son, but also his stepson. He was also a decent spouse. He took care of his wife, making sure she took the medication prescribed by her doctor. The medication regulated her mood, and thanks to it, Nicola became relatively calm. After a while, the woman embraced religion and joined the controversial Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. There she was persuaded that everything was the will of the Almighty, not man-made medicines. So she stopped taking them, which worsened Nicola's condition. Among other things, she was brainwashed. Poor mental health and self-injury played a cruel trick on the young woman. She began to claim that she could see demons and people disappearing into the kingdom of God. She also believed that there was a 100-eyed monster on earth that guarded the throne of God from enemies and took the form of a police force. Later, one of the doctors said that the patient confessed to him that she thought God had supposedly left her, taken everyone else, and abandoned her. Nicola was saddened by this, as according to her she loved and believed in him very much. She also saw storefronts as if they had experienced an apocalypse. In other words, she was talking religious nonsense and apparently catching hallucinations from time to time. At this time, presumably because of migration problems, her husband was forced to return to his home country. Seeing his wife's condition, he took the children with him. However, after a while, Nicola persuaded him to give up the eldest child, motivated by the fact that he is not his own father. Although the former spouse was concerned about her health, he still had to give the child to his mother. Apparently, he hoped that the grandmother would join the upbringing of the boy. Back home, Nicola became even more aggressive and violent. Marion worried for her grandson's safety. However, the daughter limited her mother's involvement in her son's life. Eventually, at the age of 5, the child was handed over to social services. As it later turned out, he returned to the custody of his stepfather in Jamaica. Consequently, all government benefits, including welfare and living in a city council-funded apartment, were canceled for the woman. She had to return to her parents' home. Her mother, although afraid of her daughter's actions, did not deny her shelter. Their relationship deteriorated further. Once Nicola threatened their neighbor with a knife and damaged his property. The police limited themselves to issuing a warning the second time. At the same time, she was examined by a doctor who found no signs of mental disorder. During the investigation into the murder of Sally Hodkin and the attack on Carrie Clark, it was discovered that Nicola Edgington had already committed crimes in the past. However, she was rehabilitated a short time later and was living at large under specialist care. What turned out to be appalling was that the woman had committed a crime against a close family member, and, in all likelihood, did not fully realize what had happened. It was November 4, 2005, when the entire Edgington family met for the first time in a long time. Only Harry, the father of the family, was absent. Tom and Sarah decided to visit her mother, and in order not to create obstacles in communication between his daughter and her mother, Tom decided to distract Nicola. He invited her to the local pub. Initially, their communication did not build, but after a while, Nicola said that she would soon move to London. At the same time, she was writing something down in a notebook. When Tom asked her what she was writing, her sister didn't answer, only smiled enigmatically. Afterwards, Nicola got into an argument with a member of the venue's staff, resulting in her being kicked out. Tom wanted to continue the evening on a good note, so he called his mother and suggested that she and Sarah join him. Marion declined, and the younger sister decided to keep her brother company. If they had known then how the evening would end, they would never have left their mother alone with Nicola. Back in the house, Tom noticed a strange clutter on the cot his mother had put in the guest room. It looked like a pile of clothes with someone's legs sticking out from underneath. Tom didn't realize what he was seeing. The man figured someone had spent the night at his mother's house. He reported it to Sarah. However, she decided to see if it was true, and she was right. Sarah's deafening shout of calling the police came from the room. In fact, the legs Tom saw belonged to 60-year-old Marion. The woman was dead, and stab wounds were visible on her body. In addition, there was no older sister in the house. The family suspected that she might have been involved in the crime. Their assumptions were confirmed when, searching the house for Nicola, Tom found a familiar notebook. On the first page, a list of names was written in her handwriting under the general title Doomed to Death. First on the list was Marion's name, which had been crossed off. After arriving at the crime scene, forensic investigators began examining the victim's body. They found 9 stab wounds and penetrating wounds inflicted with a kitchen knife. Later, a version was put forward that the crime occurred during a conflict between women. At the same time, a search for the missing woman was underway. Sarah made a plea on television for Nicola to return home. On November 21, 2005, Nicola Edgington was detained on her way to London. The first thing she underwent was a psychiatric evaluation. Nicola was found to be in an emotionally unstable state. She spent some time in prison before being transferred to the Bracton Center in February 2006. This facility was for people with mental health problems who had committed a crime. Specialists at the center determined that the woman could not stand trial until her health condition improved. 8 months later, she pleaded guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility. The psychiatrist's report stated schizophrenia and emotionally unstable personality traits. The doctor who observed the patient opined that she needed inpatient treatment for further behavioral risk assessment and long-term rehabilitation. Ultimately, the judge, under the Mental Health Act 1983, sentenced the defendant to be detained in a psychiatric clinic indefinitely. At the clinic, the young woman was treated with antipsychotic medication to stabilize her emotional background. However, Nicola's behavior was disturbing. It was abusive and defiant. The patient did not want to remember the crime she had committed and was looking forward to being discharged as soon as possible. In addition, she showed an increased interest in the male patients of the center. Despite this, in November 2007, the medical commission decided to transfer the woman to another room where the patients could lead a freer life. It is unlikely that this move was related to the improvement of her condition. Rather, it was probably done to free up bed space. In the new ward, the medication doses were reduced, which had a negative effect. In addition, the mentally ill person had an affair, which also affected her mood. Despite these circumstances, the heroine of the story was discharged on September 29, 2009. Nicola began to live in a subsidized apartment provided by the state in such cases. A woman who could have fallen off the wagon at any time was not left to fend for herself. She was assigned to the so-called Interagency Public Protection System. It brings together several agencies whose responsibility it is to ensure the safety of citizens from criminals who are released to live in the community. At the same time, Mrs. Edgington expressed concern about being alone at night. However, she was assured that she was supervised around the clock. In addition, there was a contingency and assistance plan in place. Nicola lived in these conditions for 2 years. She was visited periodically by a psychiatrist and a social worker. In turn, she was assessed as necessary. Surprisingly, during this time she was allowed to travel to her ex-husband's home to visit her children. In 2011, she was in a relationship with 2 men living in the home in question. They were also under supervision, so communication between them was prohibited. However, they violated the prohibition. Consequently, in March, the highly anticipated event occurred. Nicola became pregnant again. In order to carry the baby and deliver it healthy, she was taken off her medication. After a while, the pregnancy broke down, however. The ward did not resume treatment. In September 2011, the woman decided to contact her brother. She sent him a message on Facebook, telling him that she repented for killing her mother. Nicola wrote that she missed his support and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. Nicola also reported a failed pregnancy. She left him her phone number and asked him not to tell their father about the correspondence. Tom's response was brutal. Her brother couldn't forgive her. He wrote that she was a cold-blooded criminal who had forced him to discover the body of a loved one, something he would never forget. Lastly, Tom added that the news of the failed pregnancy made him happy. People like his older sister, should not reproduce, and all she has to do now is to voluntarily pass away after doing a favor to others. After that, on October 6, 7 and 9, Nicola had a nervous breakdown. During this time, she repeatedly called the police, reporting that she was receiving death threats. The police responded to the call, however, did not find anything suspicious. After that, they stopped paying attention to her calls. In September 2011, the woman decided to contact her brother. She sent him a message on Facebook, telling him that she repented for killing her mother. Nicola wrote that she missed his support and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. Nicola also reported a failed pregnancy. She left him her phone number and asked him not to tell their father about the correspondence. Tom's response was brutal. Her brother couldn't forgive her. He wrote that she was a cold-blooded criminal who had forced him to discover the body of a loved one, something he would never forget. Lastly, Tom added that the news of the failed pregnancy made him happy. In September 2011, the woman decided to contact her brother, telling him that she missed his phone number and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. She sent him a message on Facebook, telling him that she missed his phone number and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. In September 2011, the woman decided to contact her brother, telling him that she missed his phone number and that no one cared for her as much as Marion did. After that, they stopped paying attention to her calls. Nicola sought comfort. She tried to seek help from the specialist assigned to her. However, she was unable to do so because the office was closed at weekends. She turned to her faith again, but this did not help her either. Nicola's condition worsened. On October 10, 2011, the climax came. At 3 in the morning, the woman called a cab and asked to be taken to Luez Hospital. When she arrived, for some reason she told the driver that the clinic was closed and asked to return home. By the way, the treatment facility was open, but Nicola's condition alerted the driver. After a while, she started talking about being sick and needing treatment. In addition, she had not paid for the road, so around 4:30 a.m., the cab driver decided to report what was happening to the police. A patrol car picked up Nicola and took her to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There she said she wanted to leave because she didn't feel safe. However, the officers left her there alone and drove away. Nicola tried to calm herself down by starting to call everyone who could help her. First, she dialed her district nurse. As it later turned out, the nurse did not answer as she was ill. Mrs. Edgington also wrote to her social worker, tried to call the Bracton Center, but was unsuccessful, either by the law of meanness or because it was early morning and everyone was asleep. After a while, she asked the receptionist if the doctor would be in soon, to which she replied that it would have to wait a little longer. Nicola got angry and blurted out, "Do I have to kill someone to get attention?" The staff member again asked her to be patient. No one seemed to care about the woman's condition. Nicola therefore called the emergency number and asked for the police to be sent to her. The woman said that she had previously killed a man in a similar condition and needed help again. The dispatcher assured her that he would send some officers soon. In the end, no one arrived. She dialed a familiar number again and asked to be arrested while she hurt someone. Nicola repeated that she had schizophrenia and was having another attack. The police asked her where she was. She gave the address of the hospital. Then they called the clinic. The nurse assured the police that Nicola was under control. At 5:30 a.m., she was finally seen by a nurse. After another hour, Nicola was escorted to the hospital's psychiatric ward. At 6:40 a.m., the doctor on duty came to see Nicola, but he made a mistake by leaving her alone in the ward and not checking the door behind him. After 7 a.m., the woman got tired of waiting. She pushed the front door, which turned out to be open because of a broken mechanism. This is how Nicola managed to escape. Upon returning, the doctor realized that the patient was missing and reported it to the police. It was only at this point that Nicola was checked through the databases. They became aware that all this time, they had been communicating with a man who once took the life of his mother. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Nicola was out of control and attacked two unfortunate women who fell into her hands. CCTV cameras later showed Nicola's route of travel. She boarded public transport and arrived in the city center at around 8:25 a.m. After getting off the bus, the unstable woman went to a supermarket where she stole a kitchen knife. What happened later is already known. Nicola Edgington appeared in court in early 2013. The woman pleaded not guilty to charges of murder and attempted murder. The parties were divided. Several psychiatrists spoke at the trial. A defense witness, Dr. Adrian Cree, told the court about Mrs. Edgington's strange statement. When he assessed her in 2005, he said the defendant believed that her boyfriend, whom she had dated for 2 years, was actually the father of her first child. Allegedly, he returned to the UK and changed his style of dress as well as his appearance. He then started a relationship with her for a second time, introducing himself as Philip. The psychiatrist added that he was convinced that Nicola was a paranoid schizophrenic. According to the prosecution, the prevailing diagnosis of the defendant was still borderline personality disorder with rational ability. Her actions on the unfortunate day were consistent and deliberate. The prosecutor referred to a recent medical report. It indicated that there was no need for inpatient treatment for Mrs. Edgington. However, according to the defense, the woman was clearly suffering from schizophrenia and other mental problems. Therefore, her responsibility at the time of the crime was reduced. The defense lawyers reported that Nicola's condition is very serious. In turn, Nicola said that sometimes she feels like she is caught in a computer game, and the only way to keep herself safe is to be with the police. Allegedly, she has formed a belief that if she commits theft, she will be caught. She also admitted that she doesn't remember the period of time between going to the store and being arrested. She admitted to the stabbing, but pleaded diminished responsibility due to her mental state. On February 7, 2013, a jury found Nicola Edgington guilty of the charges against her. On March 4th, Judge Brian Barker sentenced her to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 37 years, the minimum sentence. He exposed the woman as a skillful manipulator who made a choice, for which she will be held accountable to the full extent of the law for the rest of her life. Do you think Nicola received sufficient punishment for her actions? Or did some representatives of the special services treat her condition negligently enough, thus provoking the crime? Story 4. You've probably heard more than once about the search for someone who has vanished without a trace. We all, in one way or another, encounter this phenomenon in everyday life. Missing person notices are commonly seen on the streets, broadcasted on TV or radio, and posted on social media. Those missing can be of various age groups, genders, social statuses, and nationalities. Most often, it's the elderly who are being searched for. Unfortunately, senile dementia and other mental disorders in older people can lead to confusion. As a result, they wander off in unknown directions. Children are the most vulnerable population. In most cases, their disappearances are due to abductions. But what about young people? Those who, it seems, shouldn't just disappear. They are healthy and rational. Often, the reasons for their sudden disappearances are violent acts committed against them. Sometimes, to conceal a crime and avoid accountability, hiding a body becomes a simpler solution. There's a legal maxim that goes, no body, no crime. However, this is with the slight caveat that the guilt of the accused or the defendant isn't confirmed by a totality of other evidence. Strange events. A complex story unfolded in the family of Graciela Garcia from Hermiston, Oregon, USA. The renowned 49-year-old beauty salon owner disappeared on November 8, 2019. That evening, she planned to have dinner with her 14-year-old son, Jacob, who was at his father's house. Imagine the teenager's surprise when, around 7 p.m., instead of his mother, his stepfather Romero appeared at the doorstep, delivering food. Typically, the man wasn't known for his care and attention. He didn't make efforts to connect with the boy, even though they lived in the same house. Nonetheless, Jacob didn't suspect anything wrong. The stepfather explained that Graciela had fallen asleep, so he came instead. After they said goodbye, the boy went to his room and checked his phone. There were 2 missed calls and a text from his mom. When he tried to call her back, he reached her voicemail. Jacob was very worried that his mother didn't respond. It was a bad sign because she was always reachable, especially since they had planned to meet. After a short while, the boy decided to tell his older brother and sisters about the situation. That evening, none of them could get through to her. Everyone thought that the mother had indeed gone to bed early and would get in touch the next day. However, the family was also concerned that her phone was unavailable to clients as it served as a link between them and Graciela. Later, the younger daughter Gabby often recalled a strange conversation with her mother. Initially happy about the meeting, the woman became sad and thoughtful. Then, she seriously informed that the children should know where she kept important documents and money, just in case. Graciela seemed to be worried about something. She showed the safe and shared the PIN code. She also added that the money and the house deed belonged to them, which couldn't be said about her current husband, Cuauhtemoc Romero Sanchez. Gabby was frightened by the conversation. Her mother was healthy and relatively young. She asked her mother what prompted this talk. However, Graciela didn't elaborate. No one ever knows what the future holds, she mysteriously replied. They never returned to that topic. Surprisingly, over time, the woman's words became prophetic. Gabby often wondered if her mother could have anticipated the tragedy, or if her disappearance was just an unfortunate coincidence. Graciela's journey. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1970, in Mexico. Her family was among the working class. Seeking a better future for their children, her parents decided to emigrate to the USA, where they eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. At the time of the move, Graciela was still very young, so she didn't remember the hardships of changing her place of residence. She graduated from Umatilla High School, which primarily catered to low-income populations. All students there received free lunches and breakfasts. With 66% of the students being Hispanic, Graciela easily found friends among them. Her sociability and natural charm distinguished her. Later, she enrolled in Blue Mountain College in the business department. From childhood, she dreamed of connecting her life with the art of hairdressing, and even better, opening her own beauty salon. Graciela was determined and hardworking. Therefore, she sincerely believed that with the right approach, her plans could be realized. By February 2006, she became the owner of Carrie's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, She soon became well known in society. Moreover, the salon's owner always looked well-groomed, which only contributed to the establishment's image. She loved her job and had a great understanding of new beauty trends. Therefore, there was no shortage of clients. Over time, some of them became Graciella's friends and were welcome at her home. In general, her name was well regarded among the townspeople. Besides her career success, her personal life was also interesting and full of happy events. Beloved men. In her youth, she met a man with whom she fell deeply in love. He was her first love. From him, Graciella had daughters Annabelle and Gabriella, often simply called Gabby. The couple didn't stay together long. The man left the family. Apparently, his feelings for the woman changed over time. Left as a single mother, she didn't despair but focused on self-improvement and earned a degree in cosmetology. Later, fate brought her together with a man of Mexican descent. He was a kind soul, and Graciella liked him very much. She eventually married him. According to the children, she never regretted this decision. He was attentive not only to her, but also to her children, accepting them as his own. Later, the family was blessed with sons Arthur and Jacob. Nonetheless, the man still called Annabelle and Gabriella his girls. Gabby recalled considering her stepfather her real father, as he always supported, protected, and cared for them. The couple did everything to ensure their family was united and happy. Raising 4 children didn't distract Graciella from her passion. On the contrary, whenever she went to professional meetings, she took them with her. The family always traveled together, which became a lovely tradition for everyone. Thanks to this, they visited many cities, got acquainted with local attractions and cultural features. Moreover, they didn't forget about their roots, often visiting Mexico. It was a good time for the Garcia family. Everyone tried their best to make the others happy. Unfortunately, after 17 years, the couple separated. The man and woman didn't want to torment each other with cooled feelings. They cherished the respectful relationship that had developed over many years. After the divorce, their interaction remained warm and strong. The father was always in touch with the children and saw them regularly. Graciella shared custody of their youngest son with her ex-husband. The other children were adults and lived separately from their parents. However, they always maintained constant contact with the family, celebrated holidays together, and often consulted with each other. Graciella went through the divorce calmly, not losing her optimism and faith in herself, thanks in large part to her ex-husband. Even during such a difficult period in life, the man behaved honorably and understandingly. Her beauty salon operated as usual, and she dedicated all her free time and energy to its development. Graciella immersed herself in her favorite work, taking a break only on Sundays. She spent this day surrounded by family and close friends. The unexpected visit on the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero stopped by Annabelle's, Graciella's eldest daughter. She was surprised by the unexpected visit from her mother's new husband. The man told her about his wife's disappearance. According to him, after meeting with Jacob the previous night, he returned home and lay down next to his sleeping wife. But in the morning, he found she wasn't there. After checking the house, he realized that she had gone somewhere. Romero tried calling and texting Graciella, but she didn't respond. He also explained that he visited Annabelle, hoping she might know something. However, the daughter had no such information. Moreover, she was shocked by Romero's words and his reaction to the situation. He was crying and seemed genuinely distressed. It was odd for her to see him this way, as he had never shown any emotions around them, except perhaps indifference. Romero also mentioned that Graciella had been acting strangely lately. He even suggested that she might have found someone else. He didn't deny that his wife might have needed a break from their relationship. In general, he wasn't sure she was genuinely happy with him and considered any reason for her disappearance. Annabelle found the man's words insincere and his tears theatrical. Moreover, she indeed started to worry about her mother, as she found his behavior suspicious. Romero had always avoided communication with his wife's children, and suddenly, for some reason, he decided to turn to them. After Romero left, the girl decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Where did the homeowner go? Graciella's children gathered around her house, determined to finally find out what was happening. Her car was parked on the driveway. If she had decided to leave Romero, she surely would have done so in her car. The second thing that caught their eye was the perfect order in their mother's house. Everything was so tidy that it looked overly perfect. Mrs. Garcia loved creative chaos. If she was going somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. She would spend a long time in front of the mirror, choosing an outfit for the new day. She loved her jewelry, yet at first glance, she left all her precious items at home. Graciella didn't even wear her favorite rings and necklaces, which she wore every day, not to mention other personal items. Everyone was concerned about what could make their mother step out in such a state. Their imagination painted terrifying pictures, one of which was fleeing. While going around the house, Gabby found something strange. A large blanket was lying in the washing machine. This could not but catch her attention, as their mother always taught them not to overload the appliances. The blanket was clearly heavy and someone else had washed it. Apparently, Romero himself. It was unlikely he would engage in household chores. Usually, Graciella took care of the house. Then what could this mean? Definitely that he was trying to hide something. However, the man did not comment on this in any way, citing that he does not pay attention to such details. Later, it was established that along with the homeowner, the following items disappeared from the house: passport, driver's license, and mobile phone. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement. Visiting the police station, she was surprised. It turns out Romero had not informed the police about his wife's disappearance, even though he knew about it since the 9th, or perhaps earlier. Thus, Graciella's eldest daughter was the first to file a missing person report for her mother, the distant personality. So who was Romero? And why didn't Graciella's family warm up to him? She met him a while after her divorce. Cuauhtemoc Romero Sanchez was one of her beauty salon's clients. Initially, their interaction was based on friendship. Later, the man took the bold step of asking the beautiful and successful woman out. Mrs. Garcia accepted his invitation, and before she knew it, their relationship evolved into something more. When she introduced him to her family, they noted his excessive aloofness and cold demeanor. Annabelle and Gabby shared that they tried multiple times to connect with him, but Romero did not reciprocate. Graciella's children were puzzled by such behavior, but attributed it to individual personality differences, especially compared to their mother's past relationships. They genuinely wanted to understand her partner and the motives driving him. Sometimes he appeared odd and unsociable to them. They couldn't grasp how such a vibrant and joyous woman could fall for someone so dry. Nonetheless, they respected her choice. When their mother announced her upcoming marriage, everyone supported her and shared in the joy of the occasion, especially the girls, because they wanted to see her happy and loved. Romero's arrogance and restraint were noted even by guests on the wedding day. Some even thought he was overly jealous, as he monopolized the bride's attention. When Graciella's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Sanchez treated them with disdain rather than affection and tenderness. It was clear he didn't want to share his wife with anyone, even her family. After that, Graciella's relatives found it hard to conceal their true feelings about the man. Annabelle even openly stated she did not consider him a stepfather, let alone a father. All they wanted was to maintain normal relations, as seen in civilized families. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved in together into Graciella's house, along with her youngest son, Jacob. The teenager shared that shortly after, Romero began acting as if he were the sole owner. According to the boy, the honeymoon period was short-lived. Soon, the family idol began to crumble. He noticed that his mother initially tried to set personal boundaries, but, being non-confrontational, quickly gave in. This seemed to suit Romero, who was quick-tempered and never the first to apologize. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciella conceded to him. Over time, it seemed she realized she had rushed into the marriage. In heart-to-heart conversations, she confessed feeling constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and wouldn't let her go anywhere alone. Yet, she never spoke of wanting to leave the abusive relationship. It appeared Graciela was still in love with him. Everyone began to understand she had tied herself to the wrong man. Moreover, it seemed he was unemployed and living off his wife, as his constant presence at her side was otherwise inexplicable. This greatly frustrated the hard-working Garcia family. Sanchez was a skilled manipulator. He followed her everywhere, monitored her correspondences, and even friendships with her girlfriends were under threat of being disrupted. He either wouldn't let her go or could unexpectedly show up as if testing Graciela's fidelity. His jealousy was excessive. The heroine became embarrassed by such behavior and ultimately limited her social circle. Her family became the only people she communicated with. This inevitably affected her professional life, as the industry demanded constant contact with clients and attendance at various events. Friends and colleagues noticed that her former cheerfulness had vanished. The always radiant woman now looked sad and worn. It was clear she was unhappy. Her children noticed changes in her mood and appearance. They also observed that she had lost her previous independence. After discussing it among themselves, they once again agreed that they didn't like Romero. However, he was an adult woman's choice, and there was little they could change, especially since they were accustomed to respecting Graciela's decisions. Other relatives also expressed distrust towards the man. At the same time, none of them knew how to help her. The couple's relationship needed professional help, and Gabby once mentioned this to her mother, to which she responded that she would manage her personal life on her own. The noose tightens. In 2018, Graciela announced her decision to relocate her beauty salon to her home, explaining it was more convenient for her. Her family was skeptical about this idea, since they had never heard her mention such a plan in the 12 years since the salon's opening. Later, some clients mentioned that Romero often hung around the salon, creating a bit of tension, as if the warm and cozy atmosphere had been lost. Some thought Graciela made this move to solve a problem, but others doubted the idea originated from her, suspecting her jealous husband insisted on the move. Nonetheless, the salon owner continued to express her enthusiasm for the long-awaited changes, noting the home-based work allowed her to be close to Jacob and Romero. By the end of the year, she and her husband were remodeling a room for the salon, but the setup unexpectedly dragged on, completing only in May 2019. Despite the closure, her reputation remained intact, and a rumor of the studio's reopening attracted a queue of clients for months ahead, including new visitors. She was thrilled with her professional success, but became increasingly reticent about her personal life. Another incident raised concerns for her safety. Graciela asked Gabby if she could pick her up. When Gabby said it would take some time as she was far away, her mother insisted, an unusual plea for help that surprised Gabby. Graciela claimed everything was fine, attributing her request to a quarrel with her husband. After meeting, they spent time together, and Graciela appeared to relax, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry, suggesting, lovers' quarrels are but lovers' renewals. They parted ways, but Gabby remained uneasy, increasingly worried for her mother. Investigation after Annabelle contacted the police, the relationship between Graciela's family and her husband deteriorated completely. He seemed angered by their decision to inform law enforcement. Romero presented an official version of his wife's disappearance, claiming she decided to take some time alone, or had gone to another man and would soon show up. This was his response to anyone trying to clarify the situation. However, the police report did not go unnoticed. Officers launched an investigation, not ruling out that the missing woman could have been a victim of a crime. They first searched Graciela's home, where relatives confirmed only a few personal items were missing, with nothing else raising suspicion. The investigation included interviews with her children, husband, and others close to the family, including her ex-husband, but nothing substantial was learned. All unanimously expressed doubt about Romero's behavior, though he cooperated with detectives, consenting to a home search, participating in interrogations, providing his DNA, and undergoing a polygraph. With no grounds for his arrest, the investigation continued. Analysis of Graciela's phone records pinpointed the last signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9th at 12:30 p.m., after which the phone was turned off. Her bank accounts remained untouched, as did her social media. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all places Graciela frequented were checked, to no avail. She seemed to have vanished without a trace, a disappearance the investigators deemed suspicious. About 4 months into the investigation, Hermiston police made a public statement, revealing no confirmed information about her last sighting. Despite Romero's failure to report her missing, there was no specific accusation against him. This stance by the authorities frustrated Graciela's relatives. Their communication with law enforcement dwindled. Previously updated weekly, contacts eventually ceased. The missing woman's children had to call the station themselves for case updates, public engagement. As of March 2020, there were no advancements in the search for Graciela. The situation was further complicated by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, her family turned to the media, hoping to draw public attention to their ordeal and solicit assistance in gathering any information. They believed that even minor details could be significant. Gabby mainly communicated with the press, expressing her family's frustration over being in the dark for months and criticizing the police for it. She implored the investigators to devote more attention to finding her mother. The Garcia family suspected foul play in Graciela's disappearance, citing several indicators, particularly the condition of her belongings and the strange situation at home. It was unclear who would take such a drastic step against her, as she had no visible enemies. It was evident she couldn't have left on her own. She would have contacted her family to reassure them. Their lack of communication indicated something terrible had happened. In addition to media coverage, posters and flyers describing the missing 49-year-old Latina woman, approximately 1.6 meters tall and weighing around 62 kilograms, with dyed blonde hair, were distributed throughout the city. Suspect nearby? Graciela's children also requested a change in the detective team handling the case, suspecting bias and collusion with Romero. Somehow, these individuals were acquainted with each other. The family voiced concerns over numerous inconsistencies in the case. It was discovered that Sanchez's phone was turned off on the day of his wife's disappearance, and his behavior did not resemble that of a person alarmed by the sudden vanishing of a loved one. The Garcia family demanded the suspect's arrest. The police chief, Jason Edmiston, promptly responded to these accusations, confirming Mrs. Garcia's disappearance as suspicious and possibly involving foul play, although this was just one hypothesis. He assured the investigation remained impartial, guided by evidence and circumstances, and dismissed any allegations of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as unfounded. Edmiston also mentioned the spread of misinformation hindering the investigation and described the case as ongoing and developing, with certain information necessarily kept confidential. Additionally, authorities sought assistance from the FBI. Edmiston expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions without understanding the legal complexities. Meanwhile, Gabby announced a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move perceived as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation, suggesting their inefficacy. On the first anniversary of Graciela's disappearance, her family organized a memorial event attended by friends and acquaintances, reminiscing about her vibrant and cheerful nature. They prayed for her safe return in lit candles, later placing signs outside the police station, urging the search for Graciela Garcia to continue. The latest update in the case came in September 2023, when a significant incident involving Romero Sanchez made headlines. He was attacked and severely injured, requiring surgery. Speculation suggested that Graciela's brother, Mason Garcia, had shot the missing woman's husband multiple times. However, the media did not disclose the event's specifics or any legal repercussions for Mason. It seemed Graciela's family had grown tired of the police's apparent inaction towards Sanchez, leading one of them to take matters into their own hands, potentially leading to a more frightening conclusion, a tragic conclusion. Currently, the disappearance of Graciela Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in agonizing uncertainty. This state of not knowing is profoundly detrimental to their health and mental well-being. Over time, one might come to terms with loss, but the difficulty of living in limbo is significantly harder. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive. Her children are left with nothing but to pray that the situation will soon become clear and that those responsible will face justice. Ultimately, No crime is perfect. Sometimes there's just a lack of motive and evidence. Story 5. Did you know that with the arrival of the holidays, the number of incidents increases? Crimes, assaults, robberies. During Christmas and New Year holidays, law enforcement officers register hundreds of crimes. What is this fact connected with? Firstly, the celebrations are accompanied by mass consumption of alcohol. People lose the measure of drinking and accordingly erase the established boundaries of behavior. Even those who have not committed atrocities before lose control. The list can also be supplemented by those who have mental deviations. When the spirit of unity, peace, and love permeates everything around, this category of society feels especially lonely and depressed. By committing criminal acts, sociopaths compensate for their moral state. In this way, they resolve accumulated internal and external conflicts. On January 25, 2022, the funeral of 26-year-old Elle Edwards was held at St. Nicholas Church in Wallasey, Merseyside, England. To see the beautiful young woman off on her final journey came several hundred people. The body of the young woman was delivered on a karate catafalque drawn by 4 white horses. Her unexpected and ridiculous death could not be accepted by the family's siblings. And the cold-blooded crime, which occurred in full view of everyone, did not leave the lips of concerned citizens for a long time. A man stopped in the parking lot near the pub Beacon, located in Wallasey. The local establishment had a special flavor and was full of visitors on Christmas Eve. For hours on end, the stranger kept his eyes on the entrance to the establishment. He felt that this was the most opportune moment for revenge. In the run-up to the festivities, the attention of many would be lessened. This meant that if he carried out his plan, he would be able to get away unnoticed. When at last the target appeared on the horizon, he fired. With a sense of satisfaction, the perpetrator started the car and fled the scene. On December 24, 2022, there was no sign of trouble. The city atmosphere was filled with magic. Everyone was preparing for the upcoming holiday. The streets were not crowded. In search missing products, some residents were actively shopping in stores. Those who had not yet bought gifts strolled through shopping centers. However, most citizens were at home with their families. Christmas is a time of gatherings and cozy company. The Edwards family was also involved in the pre-holiday hustle and bustle. In addition, everyone was waiting for Lucy, one of the daughters of the family, to meet the upcoming holidays with her family. The girl flew in from Dubai. Her sister Ella was especially looking forward to Lucy's return. They were close in spirit and kept in touch despite the distance of thousands of miles. When the joyful moment of meeting occurred, the girls decided to cross paths with friends at the local pub, Beacon. There they had a great time. They danced and sang in karaoke, joked and laughed a lot. It was calm and peaceful as never before. However, the general merriment was broken by loud clapping. "Are those fireworks?" someone asked in the crowd. No, the atmosphere of celebration was disturbed by someone's madness. At 11:50 p.m., 12 gunshots rang out at the entrance to the pub. The bullets hit 5 people, 4 guys and 1 girl. Ella Edwards suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Someone familiar with her attempted to give her artificial respiration, but the efforts were futile. Ella's condition was deteriorating. The injuries were too severe. After calling emergency services, ambulances arrived at the scene of the shooting. Having examined the victims, the medics made a preliminary conclusion. The 22-year-old suffered leg injuries, the 24-year-old guy was wounded in the arm, and the 33-year-old man's wrist was injured. The condition of 26-year-old Ella and the 28-year-old guy was deemed critical. On the way to the hospital, the unfortunate woman, without regaining consciousness, passed away. Ms. Edwards' injuries proved incompatible with life. Only a few hours before the crime, Ella had been talking to her father. "I was busy with Christmas preparations when the police reported what had happened," Tim Edwards later recalled. "Came as a real shock to our family. Everyone who knew Ella found it hard to believe what had happened. After all, she was so young and beautiful for her early demise. Did she really have ill-wishers in her entourage who were capable of such a thing? Ella Edwards was a very beautiful and cheerful girl. She worked as a beautician in a local beauty parlor and also worked part-time as a dental assistant. Despite her young age, she was established in life and had a good income. She was very goal-orientated and had no plans to rest on her laurels. Ella was not deprived of male attention. Nature awarded her with outstanding external data. Her friends noted that in addition to external beauty, her inner beauty stood out. She was very kind and positive. The character of Ms. Edwards allowed to find a common language even with the most capricious customers. For what the employee was on good account with the management. Thanks to the love of beauty and makeup, the girl was waiting for a brilliant future. However, life ordered otherwise. At the first stages of the investigation, there were no clues. The intruder attacked us suddenly as he disappeared. At the scene of the crime, he left only shell casings and victims bleeding. Detectives knew one thing for sure: the attack was planned. Police needed time to determine if Ella was the target of the attack or was a random victim. For the most part, law enforcement officials were leaning toward the idea that the girl was among the victims by accident. Detectives interviewed the victim's family to get a better understanding of the victim's personality and the specifics of her life. All spoke positively about the girl and frankly did not understand that someone could have attacked her intentionally. From their words, the deceased had no enemies. Ella was very beautiful. Perhaps there would even be those who envied her or wanted to be close to her. However, it is unlikely that the crime occurred on the basis of envy or jealousy. The Edwards family's words reinforced the police's speculation. The fact is that recently in the city has become not uncommon cases of strife between rival criminal groups. Sometimes, as a result of their use of firearms, innocent citizens suffered. Afterwards, the victims and witnesses of the incident were interviewed. Took a long time to check cell phone service. Officers also recovered CCTV footage from the pub. The investigation was to examine them. The authorities also contacted the media. They called on people with information to help bring those responsible to justice. Above all, this involved providing video footage from mobile devices that had been taken on the incident. Any of them could show the car in which the attacker arrived. City officials held a meeting with local residents. First and foremost, they wanted to support and reassure concerned citizens. The next goal the meeting had was to convince eyewitnesses to share the data they had. It was possible that someone might have seen the moment of the attack or even known the perpetrator. A group of volunteer activists was organized who went door to door and talked to citizens. The result of the work was not long in coming. It was soon established that the attacker left the pub parking lot in a dark Mercedes A-Class. CCTV cameras also showed that, having pulled up to the establishment, the offender waited for some time. Apparently, he was choosing the most convenient moment for the attack. When Elle and other young people were outside, he fired shots. After that, he quickly got into a car and drove away. It was possible to establish the moment of the crime and the fact that the attacker was alone. However, it was not possible to determine where the intruder went. So, detectives went door to door interviewing the residents. Hoping to identify the attacker, they described the vehicle and the circumstances of the incident. All city streets were patrolled around the clock. On December 25th, the funeral of the murdered girl was held. Despite it being Christmas Day, the site of the victim's last funeral was closed as a sign of grief and remembrance for the victims. The owner of the Beacon Pub left a message on his social media page with words of support for the family of Ellie Edwards. On the same day, her father laid flowers at the door of the establishment. "To my beautiful Elle, the light of my life, you will always be with us," he whispered. Already on December 26th, 2 suspects were detained. They were a 19-year-old Rockferry resident and a 30-year-old man from Tranmere. The woman was taken into custody on suspicion of conspiracy to commit a felony. 2 days later, another arrest was made against another Tranmere resident. The 31-year-old man was also suspected of conspiracy to commit a felony. At the time of his arrest, the 2 earlier arrestees remained at the station. The names of the detainees were not released due to lack of direct evidence. All 3 were soon released. The police failed to prove their involvement in the crime. The locals were angry at the rampant crime and the impotence of the police. Therefore, the detectives were forced to issue a statement again. They said that the investigation would continue until the culprit was identified and punished. It was still assumed that the shooting at the Beacon pub had been caused by a feud between local gangster clans, and the unfortunate L. Edwards was seen as a random victim. On December 30th, law enforcement reported that the 3 male victims had been released from the hospital and the condition of the critically wounded 28-year-old had finally normalized. On January 3, 2023, police reported that about 150 pieces of data were obtained during the investigation. Among them was some very important information. It was found that bullets fired by an unknown person could have been intended for Jake Duffy and Kieran Sockold. The boys were part of a local gang. The group could not share a territory where illegal substances are traded with a rival clan. According to information obtained from enclosed sources, the two were seen scuffling on December 23rd. Apparently, the two did not take the fight that took place as a looming threat to their gang. Therefore, the next day the bandits went on vacation to Mayak. By their appearance there, they put the other visitors in the gunman's crosshairs. At the same time, thanks to video surveillance systems managed to track the car on which the criminal left the scene of the crime. However, the intruder was ahead of the detectives. New Year's Eve turned out to be as turbulent as Christmas. The police station received a report of a fire near the Beacon pub. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a car matching the description of the wanted vehicle. Despite the fact that the vehicle burned out completely, the examination confirmed its identity. Apparently, the perpetrator knew that the police were on the trail, so he set the fire in order to destroy the evidence. It was also possible to establish that the car was stolen. On January 11th, the total number of people suspected in the murder of L. Edwards rose to 5. Detectives said they had made an arrest of a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman from Wirral. On January 13th, police announced the capture of the perpetrator of the shooting. He turned out to be Connor Chapman. Despite his young age, the boy was well known to police and the criminal world. He had a long record of robbery, hooliganism, threatening behavior, and aggravated carjacking. The latter offense was a real star attraction as he made headlines in many newspapers. He has been charged with several offenses in the current case. At the same time, the 23-year-old woman who was detained was released on bail. The investigation continued. It turned out that on the afternoon of December 24th, there was a scuffle between 2 rival groups. The cause was an area near a wooden church located in Beechwood. The altercation was very violent, but no compromise was reached. Somehow, Chapman became aware that several of his enemies were celebrating Christmas Eve at a local establishment. Instead of spending his first Christmas outside of prison in 4 years with his family, Connor opted for revenge. So, L. Edwards really was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Chapman wasn't acting alone. Investigators managed to find out the name of another defendant in the case. It was 20-year-old Thomas Waring. The guy was taken into custody. He was charged with possession of firearms and assisting a criminal. During a search of Thomas's home was found significant evidence for the investigation. It was a videotape taken before the incident. It shows Connor picking up a gun and saying he was going to get even with someone. After the shooting, the perpetrators hid the stolen car. Later, in order to confuse the investigation, they ordered a cab under an assumed name. At around 5 a.m., the criminals returned to the place where they had hidden the Mercedes. In order not to waste time eliminating traces, they decided to get rid of the direct evidence in the case. As for Connor Chapman's identity, it was criminalized from a young age. He was born in Birkenhead, Liverpool. He was raised by his grandparents. The boy was abandoned by his parents at an early age. Since the teenager studied poorly, he dropped out of school shortly before his exams. In general, Connor has always been a problem child. Therefore, special hopes for the guy did not lay on neither teachers nor relatives. Chapman committed his first crime, shoplifting, at the age of 14. In 2016, he committed a carjacking. In 2017, another theft was joined by possession of a controlled substance. For the past 2 years, Chapman has been under police supervision and had restraining orders. However, he was more than willing to violate them. He was eventually deemed a danger to the community, so they restricted his access to several parts of the city. In 2018, he violated the ban again. Connor was in a restricted area. He also had a knife and illegal substances on him. That same year, the public heard about him for the first time. His sorry excuse for stealing a car became an anecdote among the local population. 18-year-old Connor had no intention of getting on the straight and narrow. Last time he stole an Audi. When a patrolman on the streets of the city noticed the stolen car, he ordered the driver to stop. Chapman, however, had no intention of obeying the officer's instructions. With all his might, he pressed the gas. He only provoked a chase. Along the way, the guy committed other offenses on the road. He ended up crashing into a curb. The car was thrown sideways and spun around. As a result, the carjacker was forced to leave the cabin. After not traveling a great distance, the runner was caught. The patrol caught up with Connor in the bushes. In his defense, he said he was expecting a buddy. His phrase later became a catchphrase. At trial, the defense fiercely argued for Chapman's freedom. The defense argued that the guy was under the influence of bad company and also claimed that he was diagnosed with ADHD and a number of other mental disorders. This report was issued by a private specialist during the trial. The lawyer insisted that Connor was innocent and needed to be released. Thus, he was sentenced to 8 months in juvenile prison. Upon release, he was also brought a driving ban. This was a fairly minor punishment for a repeat offender who had 14 convictions for 30 criminal episodes. The young criminal clearly had no intention of stopping and spit on all societal rules. In January 2020, Connor went on trial again. This time, he was sentenced to 10 months in prison for being caught in a public place with pockets full of illegal substances. After serving his sentence, he was arrested again for 5 episodes of the offenses. At the same time, Chapman boasted of questionable accomplishments. He proudly claimed that he spent more time in prison than he did on the outside. Eventually, by the time he was 20 years old, he had received 19 convictions for 43 felonies. 6 months before the horrific incident at the Beacon pub, Connor was tried again. The lawyer insisted that the guy had realized everything and was finally ready to reform. Chapman himself confirmed the words of the stitch-up. As mitigating circumstances, the lawyer cited the impending birth of Connor's girlfriend. Pressing on pity, he said that the first child was born when the guy was behind bars. At the time of the last trial, the police were aware that Connor was in a gang and selling illegal substances. However, oddly enough, he was only tried for burglarizing a house and stealing a couple of electric motorcycles. Perhaps there was corruption involved in the case. At least the high-priced lawyer worked off the fees he was paid. Amazingly, everyone recognized that the guy was dangerous. At one time, law enforcement officials even made a statement on television telling the public to be wary of Connor. After committing a crime, he would serve his sentence and then be released again. It's a vicious criminal cycle. However, there was no good reason for Chapman's isolation. Most likely, it was due to the fact that no one was seriously hurt by his actions. The public was extremely indignant about the gaps in the law. It appeared that nothing could be done with hardened criminals until they maimed someone or killed them. On June 13, 2023, the trial of Connor Chapman began at Liverpool Crown Court. 12 members of the Edwards family took part. Prosecutor Nigel Power announced what the defendant was charged with. Chapman pleaded not guilty to all charges. The fact that the guy was caught on CCTV footage, he tried to deny. Connor this time said that, on the night of the attack, he was at home wrapping presents. He was also evasive about the stolen car. At first, he denied stealing the Mercedes. Connor claimed that the car belonged to his gang. Later, he said that he had burned it because he had learned that one of his associates had committed a crime with the car. As sufficient evidence had been collected, his lie was obvious. The trial lasted 3.5 weeks. During this time, all the circumstances of the crime were established. The real reason for the shooting on December 24th in a local pub was rage and revenge, which Chapman could not control. In fact, he didn't care who got in the way at the time of the massacre of Jake Duffy and Kieran Sokol, members of a rival gang. Prior to that, he had acquired a Scorpion submachine gun. The weapon could fire about 15 shots in less than 1 second. Connor jumped into the stolen car and drove to the beacon. Before firing the shot, he kept surveillance for 3 hours. In the meantime, the security camera captured Elle happily socializing with friends. She even left briefly to go into another pub before taking her sister Lucy home and returning again. At 11:47 p.m., the girl showed up outside again to have a smoke. To her misfortune, she found herself next to Chapman's targets. At this time, Connor was just in the parking lot. His long brown hair was visible on camera, as well as his face covered by a hood or balaclava. A short time later, as he heeled toward his car for further escape, he fired 12 shots. The resulting wound rendered Elle unconscious and fell on top of Sauckled. Thus, Elle Edwards received bullets that were not meant for her. After the attack, Connor was going to flee to Spain, but literally at the airport was detained by law enforcement officers. To cover their tracks, Chapman and Waring set fire to the car and got rid of the weapon, which, by the way, was never found. However, traces of Connor's DNA were found on one of the shell casings, which indicates that the defendant loaded the gun before firing it. During the search of his home, red gloves were found which were clearly visible on the pub's CCTV footage. They were also found to have his DNA on them. All of these facts linked Chapman to the massacre that took place. By the way, while the perpetrator was awaiting sentencing, both of his attack targets were behind bars. Before the jury of 5 men and 7 women went to discuss the verdict, Tim Edwards was given the opportunity to speak. He said he had been forced to view CCTV footage before the trial. "It's horrible to see your daughter die and not be able to prevent it. I will never forget it." Elle was in the street with her back turned to her perpetrator, the father reported. He added that if the shots had come 6 inches up or to the side, his Elle would still be alive. Elle's father hoped the final verdict would be fair and the perpetrator would never again be able to spend Christmas with his family on the loose. It took the judges 3 hours to come to a unanimous decision. On July 7, 2023, Connor Chapman was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 48 years. The Edwards family was happy that the cold-blooded criminal would be behind bars for the rest of his life. The convict cynically committed the crime and did not even think to repent of it. It was proved at the trial that the pub shooting was the culmination of a feud between the Woodchooch and Beechwood estate gangs on both sides of the M53. Thomas Waring was also found guilty of all charges against him. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison by the court the same month. Such a short sentence was probably due to the fact that the lad, unlike Chapman, had little criminal experience. The public was outraged. Innocent citizens were once again caught up in criminal disputes. They were even angrier that potentially dangerous gang members often served minimal sentences. Prohibitions which are used by the courts as additional penalties have little effect. This became particularly evident in the case of Connor Chapman. The lad was subject to a ban on being on the premises where the pub was located, as well as a ban on driving. To ensure the safety of the public, they proved ineffective. The death of Elle Edwards was proof of that. The incident highlighted the need for a review of the existing legal framework. In addition, the brazen attack once again highlighted the problem of firearms availability. After several similar deaths in the county of Merseyside, the government has allocated $350,000 to implement a pilot program. It is linked to reducing gun crime across the region. Tim Edwards also announced the organization of a fund to support victims of gun violence. One of the main goals of the national authorities should be to reduce the number of guns in the hands of civilians and criminal gangs. Father L. expressed his views. He also added that carrying weapons, even for children, is becoming the norm. The younger generation is particularly vulnerable to what they see and hear. Mr. Edwards recalled that during his childhood years, he never heard of any of the kids picking up a gun, much less knowing where to get one. In his words, everyone has become very vulnerable in today's society. People are not safe anywhere. An attack can happen in a private home, on the street, or in a crowded place. A prime example of this was the party at the Beacon Pub on Christmas Eve 2022. A celebration that should have been full of joy and warmth for Elle Edwards turned into an irreparable tragedy. Story 6. The Roman poet Decimus Junius Juvenal once said, "There is scarcely a litigation in which the cause of the quarrel is not a woman." Times change, but morals remain the same, and not everyone may agree, but whatever happens, a lot of it comes down to the female gender. Often behind every twisted story is a woman. In the fall of 2001, another gruesome event rocked Oklahoma City. The city is in the heart of a deeply religious belt. The so-called Bible Belt of the United States is known as a hotbed of religious and conservative values. At the same time, this part of America is known for its high rates of crime, divorce, and teen pregnancy. The cold-blooded crime that occurred in Andrew's family, saddening and outraging the faith community, added to the unfortunate list. No breaks. One rainy October morning, a strange phone call rang in the office of Robert Andrew, senior vice president of a well-known advertising company. The man on the other end of the phone identified himself as a doctor at a local hospital. The unidentified man reported that Brenda, Mr. Andrew's wife, was in critical condition. In a panic, Rob rushed to his car, started the engine, and headed for the clinic. On the way, he noticed that when he pressed the brake pedal, the vehicle would not stop. After running a red traffic light, he successfully pulled over to the side of the road. The car stopped. Miraculously surviving, he called a cab. When he got to the hospital, he learned that his wife was not a patient. When Rob took the car to a repair shop, the technician told him that the brake hoses had been cut. The unfortunate man was speechless with surprise. Someone had obviously wanted to take his life and had come up with a good reason to drive the car. But who was capable of such an act? Putting all the details together, Rob headed to the police station. He informed law enforcement officials that someone had tried to take his life, and apparently he had a pretty good idea who it was. The inseparable couple. Robert and Brenda were married for about 17 years. The couple had 2 beautiful children during their marriage. The couple were very religious, so they raised their children in faith and morals. Together, they attended church, were engaged in charity. To the average person, their union seemed happy and reliable. However, in October 2001, their family ship went down. Mrs. Andrew left her husband and filed for divorce. Good girl, Brenda. Brenda Evers was born on December 16, 1963, in Enid, Oklahoma. The girl's parents were devout Christians. They gathered around the table for meals together, held group prayers, and attended the parish. Brenda grew up a quiet and peaceful child. She did well in school. She spent most of her time at church helping others. When many of her peers were dating guys, she waited for the one and only for life. In high school, the girl was a cheerleader for the soccer team. She was very fond of dancing, but never participated in parties. In general, in her younger years, Brenda was a model of piety and modesty, like her mother. By the way, she wanted to be like her mother in everything. Therefore, after marriage, she intended to become a housewife and devote herself to her husband and children. First, love. At the age of 17, the girl met Rob Andrew, the older brother of her friend. He was older and studied at one of the state universities. Young people began to communicate. It turned out that they had a lot in common, despite the fact that the guy was a Baptist and Brenda was a Lutheran. The two of them had conservative views on life, attended church, and dreamed of creating a large and friendly family. So, the friendly relationship grew into a romantic one. After a while, the girl entered college in Winfield, Kansas. Despite the distance of 125 miles between them, the couple actively kept in touch. Eventually, to be closer to her lover, a year later Brenda transferred to a university in Ohio, in Stillwater. Close to the summer of 1984, the lovers became husband and wife metamorphosis. Soon, Robert received a tempting job offer in Houston, Texas. The man doubted the decision, but Brenda convinced her spouse. While he was building a career as an advertising manager, she managed to get a degree and get a job in banking. Mrs. Andrew fell in love with the tall buildings of the city, nightclubs, and busy life. Texas changed the young woman. She got rid of her excessive modesty. She began to take care of herself, wear fashionable clothes, makeup, made a large circle of friends. Her husband was not very pleased with his wife's transformation. He thought that a believing woman should be more restrained. Besides, Rob was homesick. Therefore, when he was offered to the advertising agency in Oklahoma City, he gladly agreed. However, Brenda did not support her spouse. They even quarreled on this ground. Then still came to a compromise. The couple agreed that Robert will settle in a new place and find a suitable house. And if everything works out well, the wife will join him. A few months they lived separately from each other. Subsequently, the family was reunited. In the early 1990s, the Andrew couple settled in a luxurious house in the prestigious neighborhood of Lansbrook. And 9 months later, they had a daughter, Tricity. Brenda even quit her job to become a housewife and engage in child rearing. For years later came son Parker. It seemed that there came a family idol. For this, they had everything: love, children, home, and financial prosperity. What happened in Mrs. Andrews' garage? On November 20th, 2001, a few days before Thanksgiving, Rob planned to stop by Brenda's house. He had made arrangements with her in advance to take the children with him for the holidays. At the time, the couple was divorced. In the evening, his ex-wife met him on the doorstep of the house. She asked the man to go to the garage and help with the faulty equipment. When he bent down, he heard footsteps behind him. Robert turned toward the noise. A gunshot rang out and the wounded man fell to the concrete floor. Around 6 p.m., the emergency services received a call. The caller turned out to be Brenda Andrew. She reported that she was injured and her husband was dead. An ambulance immediately rushed to the scene. When the paramedics arrived, they found a horrific scene. In the garage, in a pool of blood, lay a man whose cause of death was a gunshot wound. His wife was luckier, shot in the arm. Brenda's clothes were stained with blood, and the woman herself looked remarkably detached. The paramedic put her condition down to shock. "I tried to give Rob first aid, but I think he's dead," she reported. The victim's hand was bandaged, and she was later taken to the hospital. As the ambulance left the scene, police began their examination. The first thing they found was a .22 caliber bullet lodged in the wall. A little while later, a shotgun shell casing was found, so multiple weapons were used in the attack. The second thing the officers noticed was the victim's wallet. He still had it on him, so the shooting wasn't connected to a robbery. To understand what happened, it was necessary to interview Mr. Andrews' ex-wife. At the clinic, Brenda explained the reason for their meeting. She also explained that while they were busy, 2 masked armed men entered the garage. The thugs shouted something in their direction, but what exactly she couldn't hear. One of them then shot Rob twice, and the other wounded her as she was about to flee. After that, the attackers hurriedly fled. Who the attackers were and what they had come for was not known to her. However, the victim added that Robert could hardly have enemies, as he was a decent and kind person, always helping other people. The woman admitted that she was frightened by what happened, especially the fact that there were children in the house at the time of the attack. However, many things in her words were contradictory. It was clear to the police that Brenda was not telling the truth, especially the fact that the children were not packed for the trip. Interviews with neighbors yielded no positive results. None of them had noticed anything strange that fateful evening. Hoping to find out the details of Brenda and Robert's personal life, the detectives decided to question the couple's acquaintances. Midlife crisis. It turns out that after the birth of their second child, the relationship between the couple became strained. Mr. Andrew repeatedly told friends and pastor that Brenda was abusive to him, and repeatedly stated that she hated their marriage. Ronnie Stump, a friend of Robert's who was a frequent visitor to the bereaved family, said he thought their feelings were abnormal. Brenda was not shy about her expressions, even in the presence of strangers. And Rob clearly loved the woman more than she deserved, as he forgave her antics for quite a long time. Friends of the family unanimously claimed that she had undergone a strange metamorphosis. From an ordinary housewife, she turned into a woman of easy behavior. These accusations were not unfounded. There was a lot of evidence to support them. Brenda was clearly going through a midlife crisis. Her style of dress had changed. The once sophisticated woman began to dress vulgarly and brightly painted. But it didn't stop there. Mrs. Andrew became very secretive to her husband. She did not tell him where and with whom she spent time, what she was doing. Soon Robert became aware of his wife's affairs on the side. In October 1997, she began a relationship with Rick Nunley, the husband of a friend. The man was Brenda's co-worker while working at an Oklahoma bank. The couple dated for a year, and afterward had an occasional phone relationship. Later, another lover was local store owner James Higgins. At first, he was only impressed by the frank outfits and flirting, and after from the hands of Brenda, received the keys to the hotel. The man went about skillful seductress, and met with her 1-2 times a week. This affair lasted about 5 years. All this time, Rob remained in complete ignorance. However, he realized that their marriage is cracking at the seams. In addition, his wife practically stopped talking to him and spending time. He hoped that everything will eventually get better, and tried with all his might to keep the family. In 2001, Brenda stopped the relationship with Higgins, but not for the sake of her husband and the holy bonds of marriage. She was sinking more and more into the abyss of debauchery and vice. Fatal love. 2 years earlier, a Baptist church had sprung up in Oklahoma City, largely due to Mr. Andrews' contributions. In it, the man became a deacon, and his wife took the position of Sunday school teacher. From the outside, their family looked prosperous, adhering to morals and traditions. At that time, Brenda had not completely lost the image of a model wife. She gladly taught the children the basics of religion and fellowship. There, she met James Pavitt, a new lover. He was also a part-time school teacher, married and generally religious, and was friends with Rob. However, he too could not resist the charms and dazzling smile of Brenda. In the spring of 2001, they began to meet. At first, they did it secretly, but then, having lost the limits of prudence, they stopped hiding their feelings. Everyone in the church saw their sympathy for each other. Rob suspected his wife of infidelity and had a big fight with her. They separated. Just by this time, James had divorced his wife. Rob still dreamed of restoring the family, but Brenda was adamant and even filed for divorce. Just after this event, there was a strange call to Mr. Andrews' office, and then a shocking car malfunction. In making an attempt on his life, Rob suspected the sweet couple, which he reported to the police. What could have caused such thoughts in an open and ingenuous man? The same question was asked by law enforcement officials. Rob did not prevent the divorce. The agreement on children was reached. He helped Brenda financially. What else was there not to please a cheating husband? It was all about the money. In addition to teaching school, James Pavitt was an insurance agent. In the summer of that year, he took out an $800,000 insurance policy on Mr. Andrew. Brenda was the sole beneficiary. It's about the insurance. When officers began investigating the bizarre attack on Mr. Andrews' family, in addition to the relationship between the couple, they also became aware of the incident involving the car's brakes. Detectives compared the facts. Brenda's involvement in the murder of her husband became clearer. In addition, there was a new suspect in the case, her newfound lover. Then investigators learned that 2 weeks before the incident in the garage, Rob Andrew paid a visit to the insurance company. He wanted to exclude his unfaithful wife from his insurance policy. However, James refused to do so, citing that the contents of the contract could only be changed by the beneficiary himself, that is, Brenda Andrew. Not taking his former friend's word for it, Rob decided to verify the information with management. It turned out that Brenda and James had attempted to forge the insurance policy by transferring ownership to Mrs. Andrew. Rob's signature was falsified, plus it was dated retroactively. Mr. Andrew was assured by Pavitt's superiors that he still owned the policy, and only the policyholder could change the terms of the contract. When James learned of the incident, he was very angry, as the circumstances discovered were the reason for his dismissal. Investigation. Officers also became aware that Robert was in possession of a 16-gauge shotgun. When Rob was moving out of the house, Brenda did not give him the weapon. During a search of Andrew's home, the shotgun was strangely not found. Meanwhile, an inspection at Gigstad's neighbor's house yielded an unexpected result. A fired shell casing from the shotgun they were looking for was found on the bedroom floor, and several .22 caliber bullets were found in the attic of the Gigstad family home. At the time of the crime, the Gigstad couple was not home. No signs of forced entry were established. Mrs. Gigstad admitted that the spare key to their home was in Brenda Andrews' possession. Another piece of evidence came from Joanna Larson, Pavitt's daughter. On the day of the crime, the girl lent her father her car. He promised to get it repaired. However, when James returned the vehicle, the daughter realized that he did not fix it. In addition, Joanna found a strange find on the car mat, a bullet of .22 caliber. To top it all off, the girl admitted that her father told her to throw it away when she informed him about it. Investigators also discovered that James had purchased a handgun the week before the attack. Consequently, detectives planned to question the sweet couple. The last ride on November 23rd, Robert Andrews' funeral was held. This crime raised many questions among family and friends. However, even more perplexity arose when Brenda and her children did not appear at the ceremony. Also, James Pavitt did not show up to say goodbye to his friend. No one present knew where they were. This worried not only Robert's relatives, but also the police. It became obvious that the no-shows had gone on the run. Apparently, they guessed that the officers were on the trail of the perpetrators. The suspects were identified. By then, the autopsy results had come back. Brenda's description of the attack differed significantly from the forensic report. As the police had suspected, 2 different weapons were used in the attack. Robert and Brenda were wounded differently than the dead man's wife described. The first shot at the man was indeed fired from a shotgun at long range, but the second came at close range from a .22 caliber pistol. Brenda's arm itself was also shot at close range with the same gun. By analyzing the bloodstains found and their location on the fabric, it was clear that the spouse was in the vicinity of the husband when he was shot. The angle of the blood matches where the shooter was. That is, it was Brenda who fired the second shot at the wounded Robert. After receiving the results of the examination, Brenda and James were officially recognized as suspects and declared wanted. On the run. Unfortunately, the fugitives were days ahead of police. Authorities alerted border officials that the suspects may have crossed the border. However, they were nowhere to be seen. After a while, it became clear that James and Brenda had fled the country. Police speculated that they were in Mexico. To catch the criminals, it was decided to block their accounts. Without their livelihood, they would sooner or later make themselves known. And so they did. 3 months later, Pavitt contacted his daughter. He asked her to send the money. Only one thing the man didn't take into account. The girl was cooperating with the investigation. Joanna had no doubts about her father's involvement in the crime. He was clearly hiding something from her. Even that time when he asked her boyfriend to call Mr. Andrew, pretending to be a doctor at the local hospital and report his wife's illness. Thanks to James's call, the investigation became aware that the perpetrators were hiding in the city of Cancun. In February 2002, James Pavitt and Brenda Andrew were apprehended at the border and handed over to the U.S. authorities. The two were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. Meanwhile, the Andrew couple's children were placed in the care of their paternal grandparents. After their arrest, none of the defendants were willing to cooperate with the investigation. They did not plead guilty, talking in the presence of lawyers. Trials. The first to stand before the court was James. The prosecution carefully built a case. It was reported that in the past Pavitt was an army sniper and knew how to handle firearms. His scandalous affair and attempts to prevent Rob Andrew from stripping Brenda of her beneficiary status were also voiced. His daughter's testimony and the physical evidence that was found were taken into account. The jury found James Pavitt guilty and sentenced him to death. Next to go on trial was Brenda Andrew. While James's trial was methodical, building up into a clear portrait of motives, means, and execution, Brenda's trial was full of sordid details, revelations, and intrigue. The prosecution brought Brenda's personality and her string of infidelities to the forefront. Her former lovers were invited to the hearing. They characterized the woman as a person of far from faith and integrity. When the prosecutor asked Brenda why she killed her husband, she replied, "God knows that in my heart I am pure and innocent. If you are people of faith, set me free." The prosecutor disagreed. He presented her as a lecherous woman who did not love her husband, cheated on him, and then killed him for selfish purposes. To prove his point, he showed the contents of a suitcase she had taken with her to Mexico. It contained lacy lingerie as well as the 203 ways to drive a man crazy in bed. Would a grieving widow run away from her husband's funeral? The prosecutor asked the defendant. In turn, the defense team tried to portray Brenda as a victim of what happened. The defense attorney recalled that she was also injured in the attack. However, forensic experts said that the woman shot herself in the arm, to which the defense said that it possessed a letter with Pavitt's sole confession to the crimes committed. That would seem to be a valid argument. However, the handwriting expertise established that the document was forged by Brenda Andrew herself. However, the most shocking revelation was another. Pavitt's attorney stated that in the event of his ward's death, Brenda became the beneficiary of his insurance policy. In time, apparently, the same fate awaited him as Rob. Or maybe Brenda thought that she would be able to prove her innocence and the punishment for the crime would fall on the shoulders of her lover. After the latter's death sentence, she'd be entitled to the insurance money too. The jury deliberated for about 6 hours. In the end, Brenda Andrew was found guilty of the crime charged and sentenced to death. Bottom line, both convicts are on death row awaiting execution. Brenda repeatedly appeals the judgment but is unsuccessful. Pavitt's execution is scheduled for July 2024. It may be rescheduled again as it has been done 4 times before. Brenda's execution date has not yet been set. She is the only woman sentenced to capital punishment in Oklahoma. The criminal intent of Brenda and James is horrific in and of itself. However, the fact that these men considered themselves God-fearing, teaching morality to children, further clouds the situation. People who preach things that do not guide their personal lives are unscrupulous and ruthless. You can expect anything from them because they are unfamiliar with moral principles. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.